Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the security news update for June 4th, 2023. In the security and privacy section, probably for the first time ever, a district judge has sided with U.S. citizens and said that Customs and Border Protection needs a search warrant to search U.S. citizens' phone at the border. Historically, and this is really kind of more of a judicial interpretation rather than like any kind of law. The interpretation has been that the customs folks do not need any kind of warrant and do not need any kind of suspicion to search your phone at the border. And the definition of at the border is within 100 miles of any border of the United States, which covers about 2/3 of the population. This was really designed when, you had a suitcase or a package or a box or something, and they wanted to open up and look inside of it. This is very different when they're looking inside your phone, although historically the courts have not sided with U.S. citizens. So this is really an outlier decision, and we will see where this winds up on appeal. I am assuming that the government is going to appeal this. But it's probably a good thing. It seems unreasonable that the feds can search the phone of 2/3 of the U.S. population without any reason or suspicion. Next, Gigabyte, who is a big Chinese or Taiwanese motherboard manufacturer, apparently had a security problem, and this is really a design problem in the sense that their motherboard really didn't do the validation necessary. I mean, their heart was in the right place, but they screwed up with the implementation. There's at least 275 models of motherboards that are affected, and they probably go into a wide variety of manufacturers' computers. Yeah, I don't know how to easily figure out whether your particular computer is vulnerable or not. Look for patches, and if you see patches, I would definitely install them. Microsoft finally, after many, many years, is going to turn on server message block signing by default. They started it this week with with the Windows build for the Enterprise Edition, but only right now for insiders in the Canary channel, which is the early adopters, super early adopters. But it'll expand over the next couple of months. The impact of this is potentially that it will break certain things that don't know how to deal with signed messages coming back from your Windows boxes. My suggestion is you turn it on now and do it in a controlled environment. Like I said, this is a feature that's been around for years, and see if you break anything. That way it's kind of under your control, as opposed to when it goes out in some Windows update and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. And turning it on does not require a reboot, so it's pretty easy to turn on and off. Next, in the patch department, Microsoft, and they're kind of an equal opportunity hacking group, just like Google is. They found a bug in Mac OS that allows an attacker to bypass System Integrity Protection, or SIP, and it installs an undeletable bit of malware that accesses the user's data and steals it. The only saving grace of this thing is that you have to have root permissions to exploit the bug, but if you're successful, no one will ever know, and you can't remove it other than destroying the computer and buying a new one. Apple has fixed the bug in a particular release of Mac OS. The interesting thing here is that Microsoft was able to do this only using Apple signed executables. They did not need to install any malware. Next, in the legislative and legal department, Twitter pulled out of the EU's voluntary pact against disinformation. Before everybody goes crazy with this, this pact is kind of becoming irrelevant in August, and that might have been Twitter's idea behind this, although personally I would have just stayed put. But the Digital Services Act, which goes into effect in late August, is going to require everything that was in this voluntary pact, except that it's not voluntary, and you run the risk of contributing up to 8% of your global revenue to the EU if you screw it up. So not sure exactly what their plan is. They don't really have much of a trust organization left. Their head of trust just quit this week, so not clear what they're doing there, but it's going to be interesting to watch. And the EU says they're locked and loaded, waiting for Twitter to screw up. So we shall see. Wouldn't want to be Twitter right now. Next, a judge in Texas banned AI generating filings in his court. He basically said AI just makes shit up when it doesn't know what to do. So you, as the attorney, are going to have to sign an attestation that either you didn't use any AI in the making of the filing, or if you did use AI, that you had a human being verify every citation for correctness and applicability. And if you don't, then the judge can hold you in contempt of court or worse, potentially perjury. Because if you sign an affidavit that said you did this and you didn't, well, that's probably not a good thing. In the breaches department, Dallas is making some progress from the cyber attack early last month. Firefighters and police are still doing handwritten stuff, and the firefighters don't have the digital information that they normally had or used to have. The library has opened. You can check out books, but you can't check them back in. So they said don't return any books. And the courts are open, except they're not having any trials or any juries or anything like that. So I'm not sure what open means. Maybe it means that the judges can get back into their offices and do some paperwork or something. So this is pretty painful. Hopefully they'll shore up security now. This has got to be pretty embarrassing to Dallas, I would think. This is a month's worth of work and not even remotely done, it sounds like. Also in the breaches department, MCNA, which is provides Medicaid rather, not Medicare, Medicaid and CHIPS recipients with dental care. They have about 8.9 million folks who get care under their thing. They are basically the back end for hundreds of dental practices that participate in the program. They're still trying to figure out exactly how to notify everybody, but there was clearly no separation of data. The hackers just got everything: names, addresses, health plans, care information, bills, claims, just everything. So not good. I'm sure there will be lots of lawsuits over this. But one thing that it points out is, having everything all together with no separation means if the bad hackers get in, then they get everything. Our dear friends in Toyota are learning lessons the hard way. After this is the second or third breach in the last couple of months. This time, only 250,000 car owners' data was exposed, and this time only for 7 years worth of data, or the data was exposed for 7 years. So as I said in the title, now after the horse is out of the barn's burned to the ground. Toyota says, hey, maybe we should invest a little bit in security. So we shall see. And this is just total screw up on Toyota's part. Nothing. This is no sophisticated hack here. This is just stupid. Next, Russia accuses the U.S. of spying on them by hacking iPhones. Can you imagine that countries who are adversaries in the political space would spy on each other? Who would think that they would do that? On the other hand, Russia is, using iPhones, thinking they're secure, and they, relatively speaking, they're secure. For the average consumer, they're plenty secure. But for a diplomat who's engaged in a war, it doesn't seem like it's a really secure phone. So remember, now maybe, iPhones are made in China for the most part, almost all of them. And so maybe Russia considers China a friend, and but I mean, who knows what the issue is here and whether there really was any spying, whether the U.S. is involved or not. Unclear. U.S. is not. U.S. of course is denying it, but that doesn't mean much either, because Russia denies things all the time. You also might remember that when the U.S. built its embassy in Moscow, after it was built, and we used Russian labor, we discovered that it was so full of bugs that it was basically unusable. And so we actually had to build another floor on the top of the building, which we imported our own people and we imported our own materials in diplomatic pouches. It was really a mess for several years, and for the Russians to go off and say it's unfair that the Americans are spying on us, assuming we are, which is not clear, pretty funny. I mean, they're just blowing smoke at this point. Next, we talk about ransomware all the time, right? Because there's lots of it, like Dallas I just talked about a minute ago. But there are normal effects and there are kind of abnormal effects. And the abnormal effects, for the most part, are externalities, meaning they affect third parties, not the company. So in this particular case, although in this particular case it affected both, this is the company basically went out of business, and the people who this was a medical practice who had appointments, who had medicine they needed, they were just out of luck. And in some cases, they'd paid for the medicine and they didn't have it. I mean, the place they went there on Monday morning, the place was empty. So pretty bad thing for the people who were, those I think are the victims of the ransomware attack, as opposed to the company, which didn't have good cybersecurity practices, I suspect. Next, the FBI, NSA, and a bunch of other countries have issued an advisory about an attack that China is using called the living off the land attack, meaning that they use built-in software and they don't have to install software which might be detected by anti-malware software. And apparently it's pretty widespread. This is not a targeted attack. This is kind of a brute force sort of attack. So the best you can do is you're alerting and monitoring, look for exfiltration of data, look for odd behavior, but this one's going to be a tough one to go stop, which is why I think the FBI and others put out the alert. Next, the Federal Trade Commission is helping application developers understand the rules of data sharing. It's kind of interesting. There are rules associated with them, and in particular, when you're dealing with sensitive data, personally identifiable data that is technically not covered by HIPAA, but is covered by other rules, some of them dating back over a decade. And this training program is really nice. It's extensive. It lasts for about 20 years while the FTC is watching over you. My suggestion is you should probably try to avoid that program if at all possible, because it's going to be expensive and it's not going to be pleasant. But I think, people learn the hard way that, there are rules to sharing data. And lastly, in the news bites section, the Dutch Data Protection Authorities, the DPA, are looking into an alleged Tesla data breach. Apparently, someone has posted multiple gigabytes worth of data, including customer complaints and a bunch of other stuff, to the dark web. They're investigating. They haven't said anything about it. So stay tuned for what happens here. We don't know. Next, Suffolk County in New York, which suffered a breach last year, has and as a result of this breach, they blame their IT guy. It was his fault. He says he had notified the county many times about the insufficiency of their cybersecurity practices. Now the county executive, which is the head of the county political organization, kind of like, I don't know, the president of the county or the governor, he has been declaring emergency cases like 9 times now because they expire, and he's been using that to bypass the procurement process, the review process, the approval process, and apparently the local legislature is kind of caught on to this idea, and they're about to vote on cutting him off. But I'm guessing that he's using this emergency situation to go off and make up for years worth of malpractice without having any oversight, without having any control over spending. And I think you think 9 times. So I guess it probably only lasts for 30 days is my guess, each time. You'd think that the county would have figured it out long before now, but there's a big political process, and sometimes people look the other way. But surprise, we shall see. Next, the spyware maker NSO Group is got a new owner. The new owner is one of the co-founders of the group. I don't think that'll do much to repair their reputation. I don't think that will get them off the banned entities list. But it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think there's a long road to reputational recovery, if that's even possible. Next, here's a shocker for you. You don't get what you don't pay for. Saw an alert this week that said that if you're using the free version of Google Workspace, you don't have logs and alerts. Yeah, duh. That's why it's free. And if you want the paid version, or if you want those features, you need to buy the paid version. So, and I don't know that there's a lot of businesses who are using the free version. I'm sure there are some, but I don't recommend that because you just don't have any security mechanisms in place. So if you are using the free version, probably time to ante up and pay. If you have any questions about that, reach out to us for sure. And lastly, in light of this supposed attack by the United States against Russian diplomats, Russia wants to replace all of their government iPhones with homegrown Aurora OS phones, which is from what I understand, it's a variant of an Android phone. Now, everybody says that Android phones are not as secure as iPhones. On the other hand, if they really remove most of the functionality of an Android phone, it's probably pretty secure. Now, whether or not people are going to be interested in using a phone that doesn't have much functionality, you could use a flip phone if that's what you want to do and save a lot of money. But they might buy as many as 2 million of these phones from some Russian, company. Personally, I think it's a good decision on Putin's part because it's likely, they don't have the sophistication and they don't have the resources to go off and patch these things as quickly as happens in the United States. So probably those phones will be less secure, even less secure than an iPhone, which in the case of, a country fighting a war are probably not very secure anyway. With that, if you're concerned that you might not be quite ready for a ransomware attack, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you. And until next time, stay safe.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.